Zachary Mitchell never imagined his top-tier piloting skills would land him in an arranged marriage with an alien. Yet here he was in 2145, Earth's premier fighter pilot, thrust into an interspecies partnership that felt more like a corporate merger than a military alliance. The X-37 space fighter hung suspended in its launch bay, a marvel of human engineering. Its sleek lines and advanced weaponry represented the pinnacle of Earth's defensive capabilities. But even this technological triumph wasn't enough. Earth's first interstellar fighter squadron faced a critical shortage, not of machines, but of capable wingmen. Enter the Krenum, a technologically advanced alien race with reflexes and spatial awareness that put humans to shame. Their solution? Pair their female pilots as wing girls with Earth's finest. The brass called it a joint training program. Zachary called it babysitting. Quasar stood on the deck below, her iridescent skin reflecting the harsh hangar lights. She was all business, checking her flight suit with methodical precision. Zachary's lip curled. He'd show them exactly what he thought of this alliance. The training exercise began smoothly enough. Zachary's X-37 cut through the simulated asteroid field with practiced ease. Quasar matched his every move, her smaller Krenum craft darting nimbly in his wake. Then came the critical maneuver, a complex series of rolls and thrusts designed to evade enemy fire. Zachary's fingers danced across his controls. A subtle adjustment here, a millisecond delay there. To an outside observer, nothing seemed amiss. But as Quasar attempted to mirror his actions, her ship spiraled out of control, crashing spectacularly into a virtual asteroid. The debriefing was brutal. Human and Krenum commanders united in their condemnation of Zachary's actions. Their punishment was swift and severe. 2 weeks of intensive training on Europa, Jupiter's icy moon. The outpost on Europa was a cramped utilitarian affair. Stripped of distractions, Zachary and Quasar were forced into close quarters, their mutual distrust simmering in the recycled air. Days blurred together in a grueling routine of simulations and drills. It was during one such late-night session that they stumbled upon the anomaly, a blip on long-range sensors, easily dismissed as space debris, but something about the pattern nagged at Quasar's instincts. They dug deeper, cross-referencing data and historical records. The pieces fell into place with chilling clarity. A Zorgon invasion fleet approaching from the outer reaches of the solar system. Earth's worst nightmare, realized. Suddenly, their petty rivalry seemed insignificant. The stakes had shifted dramatically. Earth and the Krenum faced extinction if they couldn't present a united front against this common enemy. Zachary and Quasar threw themselves into their training with renewed vigor. They pushed the boundaries of their ship's capabilities, developing maneuvers that leveraged the strengths of both species. Slowly, grudgingly, a partnership began to form. As the end of their 2-week exile approached, Zachary found himself studying Quasar with new eyes. Her determination, her quick mind, the grace of her movements in zero-G, qualities he'd initially resented, now filled him with a reluctant admiration. They prepared to return to Earth, carrying the weight of their discovery. The coming war would test them in ways they couldn't imagine. But as Zachary watched Quasar prep her ship for the journey home, he realized that perhaps, just perhaps, this unlikely alliance might be humanity's salvation. Little did he know, it would also be the beginning of a personal journey that would end with him calling this alien his wife. The journey back to Earth was tense, filled with the weight of their discovery. Zachary found himself stealing glances at Quasar, noting the determined set of her jaw as she piloted her craft alongside his X-37. Their shared secret forged an unspoken bond, one that transcended their initial animosity. As they entered Earth's atmosphere, Zachary keyed his calm. "Ready for this?" he asked, surprising himself with the lack of sarcasm in his tone. Quasar's reply came swiftly. "Always human. Let's hope they listen." The debriefing room buzzed with a mix of human and Krenum officials. Zachary stood at attention, acutely aware of Quasar's presence beside him. As they presented their findings, the room fell into a stunned silence. Admiral Hernandez, a grizzled veteran of Earth's space wars, leaned forward. "You're certain about this Zorgon fleet?" "Yes, sir," Zachary replied, his voice steady. The data is conclusive. The Krenim High Commander, Captivates, chittered in his native tongue before the translator kicked in. This changes everything. We must accelerate our joint efforts immediately. What followed was a whirlwind of activity. Zachary and Quasar found themselves at the center of a newly formed task force. Their mission critical. Develop combat strategies to counter the Zorgon threat. Days blurred into weeks as they pushed themselves to the limit in state-of-the-art simulators. Zachary's X-37 fighter became an extension of himself, its responsiveness honed to perfection. Quasar's smaller craft danced around him, her movements precise and calculated. During one particularly grueling session, their simulated ships took heavy fire. Alarms blared as systems failed, but Zachary's hands moved instinctively across the controls. "Quasar, on my 6," he barked, diving into a dense asteroid field. Without hesitation, she followed, her ship mirroring his every move. They wove through the rocky maze, evading enemy fire with a synchronicity that surprised them both. As they emerged victorious, Zachary felt a surge of unexpected admiration. "Nice flying," he admitted, a hint of a smile in his voice. Quasar's response was typically succinct, but he detected a note of warmth. "Acceptable teamwork, Mitchell." Their breakthrough didn't go unnoticed. Soon, other human Krenim pairs were studying their techniques, attempting to replicate their seamless coordination. Zachary found himself uncharacteristically proud of their accomplishments, even as he bristled at the attention. The military brass, sensing an opportunity, scheduled a public demonstration. Earth's skies would serve as their stage, with crowds gathering to witness the power of interspecies cooperation. On the day of the event, Zachary's nerves jangled as he ran through pre-flight checks. Quasar's voice came through his headset, calm and steady. "Focus, Mitchell. We've done this 1,000 times." He nodded, grateful for her grounding presence. As they launched into the azure sky, Zachary felt the familiar rush of adrenaline. Their X-37 fighter cut through the air with surgical precision, executing maneuvers that defied belief. The crowd below gasped and cheered as they wove impossible patterns across the heavens. Zachary allowed himself a moment of satisfaction, reveling in the perfect harmony he and Quasar had achieved. Then everything changed. A warning blip on their sensors shattered the choreographed routine. Zachary's eyes widened as he processed the data. "Quasar, are you seeing this?" "Affirmative. Unidentified craft, Zorgon energy signature. How did it get this close?" Without conscious thought, they broke formation, their fighters streaking towards the intruder. Ground control erupted in confused chatter, but Zachary tuned it out, focused entirely on the threat at hand. The Zorgon scout ship, sleek and predatory, seemed surprised by their swift response. It fired a volley of energy blasts, which Zachary dodged with reflexes honed by countless simulations. "Weapons hot," Quasar announced, her fingers dancing across the targeting systems. Their return fire struck true, damaging the scout ship's propulsion systems. But the victory was short-lived. As the Zorgon vessel retreated, it launched a final, devastating energy pulse. The blast caught them off guard, overloading their systems in a cascade of failures. Alarms screamed as their fighter began to plummet, caught in Earth's unforgiving gravity. "We've lost primary power," Zachary shouted, fighting the controls. "Switching to manual override." Quasar's voice was tight with concentration. "Rerouting auxiliary power. We need to level out." The ground rushed up to meet them, a dizzying blur of green and gray. Zachary's arms strained as he wrestled with the stick, every muscle focused on regaining control. Beside him, Quasar worked furiously, her movements perfectly complementing his own. At the last possible moment, they managed to pull up, the fighter's belly nearly scraping the treetops. Zachary's heart pounded as they skimmed the surface, gradually climbing back to a safe altitude. As they touched down on the runway, the roar of the crowd was deafening. Zachary sat motionless for a moment, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. He turned to Quasar, seeing his own mix of exhaustion and exhilaration mirrored in her alien features. "We did it," he breathed, a grin spreading across his face. Quasar's skin shimmered with what he now recognized as her species' version of a smile. Indeed we did, Mitchell. Indeed we did. As they emerged from the cockpit, they were engulfed by a sea of cheering humans in Cranham. Zachary felt Quasar's hand brush against his, a gesture of solidarity amidst the chaos. In that moment, he realized their partnership had evolved into something he never expected, a connection that transcended species, forged in the heat of battle. The debriefing that followed was intense, military leaders from both races eager to dissect every detail of their encounter with the Zorgon scout. But even as they recounted the harrowing experience, Zachary's mind was already racing ahead. The real fight was yet to come, and he knew that he and Quasar would be at the forefront. As they left the debriefing room, exhausted but energized, Zachary turned to his partner. "Ready for what comes next?" he asked, echoing his earlier question with a new depth of meaning. Quasar met his gaze, her alien eyes filled with a grit that matched his own. "Always, Zachary. Always." Always. The word echoed in Zachary's mind as he and Quasar strode through the bustling corridors of Earth's orbital defense headquarters. Their newfound partnership had catapulted them into leadership roles, heading the first fully operational human cranium squadron. The weight of responsibility settled on Zachary's shoulders, a constant companion to the thrill of command. Their first task proved more daunting than any space battle, integrating two vastly different species into a cohesive fighting unit. Cultural clashes erupted daily, from miscommunications over battle tactics to disagreements about proper maintenance procedures for their hybrid vessels. "Krillhead!" The human insult rang out across the hangar bay, followed by a string of clicks and whistles that the translator rendered as equally unflattering. Zachary exchanged a weary glance with Quasar before they hurried to intervene. "At ease, both of you," Zachary barked, stepping between the red-faced human pilot and his overflowing Crenum counterpart. "Save that aggression for the Zorgons." Quasar's skin rippled with subtle patterns, a calming technique she'd developed for dealing with her more volatile teammates. "Your differences are your strength," she intoned. "Learn from each other, adapt, or we all perish." As the chastened pilots returned to their duties, Zachary marveled at Quasar's diplomatic skills. She'd come a long way from the aloof alien he'd first encountered. Their moment of peace was shattered by a priority alert blaring through the station. Zachary's heart raced as he deciphered the message. The Zorgon invasion fleet had breached the solar system's outer defenses. Chaos erupted as pilots scrambled to their ships. Zachary caught Quasar's eye, a silent understanding passing between them. This was the moment they'd trained for, the crucible that would test their unlikely alliance. As they suited up, Zachary felt a newfound intimacy in their pre-flight routine. Each movement was synchronized, born from countless hours of shared cockpit time. He found himself studying the graceful curve of Quasar's neck as she adjusted her helmet, quickly averting his gaze when she turned. "Zachary," she said, her voice low, "whatever happens out there—" "I know," he interrupted, surprising himself with the depth of emotion in his voice. "Me too." The moment was broken by the thunderous roar of engines as the first wave of fighters launched. Zachary and Quasar took their positions, leading their squadron into the inky void of space. Hours of tense silence followed as they approached the coordinates of the Zorgon fleet. Zachary's fingers twitched over the weapon controls, adrenaline coursing through his veins. Suddenly, their sensors lit up, but instead of the expected Zorgon warships, a single, sleek vessel appeared. "This is Krastor of the Zorgon Reformation Front," a gravelly voice crackled over the comms. "I come in peace, seeking asylum and offering vital intelligence." Zachary's mind reeled. This wasn't part of the plan. He opened a secure channel to Quasar. "What do you think? Trap?" Her response was measured. "Possible, but if he's genuine..." Their debate was cut short by new orders from command. They were to escort Krasitor to a secure facility on Earth's moon. As they maneuvered into position around the Zorgon ship, Zachary couldn't shake a feeling of unease. The journey back was tense, every moment shadowed by the threat of ambush. As they entered lunar orbit, Zachary noticed an anomaly in Krastor's engine emissions. It was subtle, easily overlooked, but it matched a classified Zorgon weapons signature he'd studied in briefings. Before he could alert Quasar, a new complication arose. A Cranum battlecruiser dropped out of faster-than-light travel, positioning itself between them and the moon. "This is High Commander Nexus," a familiar voice boomed across all frequencies. "The Cranum Imperium demands the immediate transfer of the Zorgon prisoner to our custody." Zachary felt Quasar stiffen beside him. "Father," she whispered, her usual composure cracking. The situation spiraled rapidly. Nexus accused the humans of hoarding vital intelligence, while Earth's commanders argued for their right to interrogate Krasitor first. Caught in the middle, Zachary and Quasar faced an impossible choice. "We can't trust Krasitor," Zachary muttered, sharing his suspicions about the weapon signature. Quasar's inner eyelids flickered, a sign of deep thought. "Agreed. But if we reveal that now, we lose any advantage of surprise." Their decision was made in silent agreement. They would play along, escorting Krasitor to the lunar facility while secretly preparing for potential betrayal. As they landed, Zachary felt the weight of countless lives resting on their next moves. The fate of two worlds hung in the balance, threatening to tear apart the fragile alliance they'd worked so hard to build. Quasar's hand brushed against his as they disembarked, sending an electric jolt through his body. In that fleeting touch, Zachary found unexpected strength. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. They marched forward, Krasitor between them, into a future fraught with danger and uncertainty. The true test of their partnership, and perhaps something deeper, was only beginning. The true test of their partnership, and perhaps something deeper, was only just beginning. As Zachary and Quasar exited the lunar facility, they were immediately swept into a flurry of activity. Admiral Elena Rodriguez, her face etched with concern, approached them briskly. "Mitchell, Quasar, we need you in the war room, now." They exchanged a quick glance before following the Admiral. The corridors buzzed with tension, personnel rushing to and fro with an urgency that set Zachary's nerves on edge. Inside the war room, a holographic display of the solar system dominated the center. Red markers indicating the Zorgon fleet's position blinked ominously close to Earth. "The situation has escalated," Admiral Rodriguez began, her voice taut. "Our intelligence suggests the Zorgons will reach Earth's orbit within 48 hours. We're initiating Operation Starbreak." Zachary's pulse quickened. Operation Starbreak was the joint human-Cranum plan to exploit a weakness in the Zorgon fleet's defenses. It was risky, untested, and their best hope for survival. "Your squadron will lead the assault," Rodriguez continued. "You'll target this point here." She gestured to a specific area of the Zorgon formation. As the Admiral detailed the plan, Zachary felt Quasar tense beside him. He glanced at her, noting the subtle ripple of her skin that indicated stress. Their briefing was interrupted by the arrival of General Thaddeus Blackwood, his face a mask of terrifying fury. "Admiral, a word." Rodriguez excused herself, leaving Zachary and Quasar to pore over the mission details. They worked in comfortable silence, their movements in sync as they analyzed attack vectors and defensive formations. Suddenly, the door burst open. General Blackwood stormed in, followed by a flustered Admiral Rodriguez and a stern-faced Cranum that Zachary recognized as Nexus, Quasar's father. "This mission is compromised," Blackwood thundered. "These two can't be trusted to lead it." Zachary straightened, indignation flaring. "What are you talking about, sir?" Instead of answering, Blackwood gestured to a man Zachary didn't recognize. "Dr. Holloway, explain your findings." The man stepped forward, looking uncomfortable. "I'm Dr. Marcus Holloway, xenobiologist. I've discovered that prolonged exposure to human pheromones can trigger a rare bonding process in Cranum physiology. It's similar to pair bonding in some Earth species." Zachary felt his stomach drop. He looked at Quasar, seeing his own confusion mirrored in her alien features. "This bond could affect their judgment," Blackwood pressed. "We can't risk the fate of two worlds on a pair of pilots who might be biologically compromised." Nexus stepped forward, his voice cold. "I concur. My daughter must be removed from this mission immediately." Quasar's skin flashed with patterns Zachary had never seen before. "Father, you can't—" "Silence," Nexus commanded. "This is for your own good and the good of our people." Admiral Rodriguez raised her hands, calling for order. "We don't have time for this. The Zorgon fleet is advancing, and we need our best pilots out there." "Then we'll find new best pilots," Blackwood retorted. "I want them grounded and separated until we can determine the extent of this bond." Zachary felt a surge of anger. "With all due respect, sir, this is ridiculous. Quasar and I have been training for months. Our performance speaks for itself." "Does it?" Blackwood's eyes narrowed. "Or is that just the bond talking?" Admiral Rodriguez's voice cut through the tension. "Enough. Mitchell, Quasar, report to Medical Bay 7 immediately. You'll undergo a series of tests to evaluate your fitness for duty." As they left the war room, Zachary's mind raced. He glanced at Quasar, trying to read her expression. "Did you know about this bonding thing?" Quasar's inner eyelids flickered rapidly, a sign of distress. "I had no idea. Zachary, I swear I would have told you if—" "I know," he said softly. "We'll figure this out." The next hours were a blur of physical and psychological evaluations. Zachary's body ached from the grueling physical tests, his mind exhausted from the battery of mental challenges. Through it all, he caught glimpses of Quasar in adjacent rooms, her movements as graceful and determined as ever. Finally, they were brought together for a series of simulations. As they entered the simulator pod, Zachary felt a familiar sense of rightness settle over him. Whatever this bond was, it didn't change the fact that he and Quasar worked better together than apart. The simulations were brutal, more challenging than anything they had faced before. Scenarios flashed by, each more difficult than the last. Zachary lost track of time, his world narrowing to the controls beneath his hands, and Quasar's steady presence beside him. When it was over, they emerged to find Admiral Rodriguez waiting for them. Her face was unreadable as she led them to a small conference room. "Your results were exceptional," she began. "You've outperformed every benchmark we set." Relief flooded through Zachary, but it was short-lived. "However," Rodriguez continued, "General Blackwood and Nexus are still pushing for your removal from the mission. The Council is deliberating now." As if on cue, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Rodriguez's comm unit crackled to life. "Admiral, the Zorgon fleet has accelerated. They'll reach Earth's orbit in less than 12 hours. Rodriguez's face hardened. "Understood." She turned to Zachary and Quasar. "Looks like the decision's been made for us. Get to your ship. You launch in 20 minutes. As they raced towards the hangar, Zachary's mind whirled. In mere hours, they would be leading the assault against the Zorgon fleet, the fate of two worlds hanging in the balance. He glanced at Quasar, seeing the same mix of persistence and apprehension he felt. Whatever this bond between them was, whatever challenges lay ahead, Zachary knew one thing for certain. There was no one else he'd rather have by his side. The hangar bay was a maelstrom of activity as they arrived. Pilots and ground crew scrambled to prepare for launch, the air thick with tension and the acrid smell of engine exhaust. Zachary and Quasar made their way to their X-37 fighter, its sleek form a familiar comfort amidst the chaos. As they began their pre-flight checks, a commotion near the hangar entrance caught Zachary's attention. General Blackwood and Nexus had arrived, their faces thunderous. But before they could intervene, Admiral Rodriguez stepped between them and the departing squadron. "This is my command, gentlemen," her voice carried across the hangar, "and I say they fly." Zachary met Quasar's gaze, a silent understanding passing between them. As the canopy lowered, sealing them into their own world of blinking lights and humming machinery, Zachary felt a sense of clarity he hadn't experienced since this whole ordeal began. "Ready?" he asked, his hand hovering over the launch controls. Quasar's skin shimmered with persistence. "Always." With a roar of engines, their X-37 fighter shot out of the hangar, leading a mixed squadron of human and Krenim pilots into the star-studded void. As Earth receded behind them, Zachary knew that the true test of their partnership, and whatever lay between them, was about to begin. The vastness of space stretched before them, a canvas of infinite black punctuated by pinpricks of starlight. Zachary's hands tightened on the controls as he guided their X-37 fighter out of the lunar hangar, leading the mixed squadron of human and Krenim pilots into the void. Zorgon fleet approaching outer system defenses, Quasar reported, her multifaceted eyes scanning the tactical display. ETA to engagement, 17 minutes. Zachary nodded, his focus narrowing to the task at hand. The weight of two worlds rested on their shoulders, but he forced the thought aside. Right now, all that mattered was the mission. As they approached the outer edges of the solar system, a field of twisted metal and frozen debris loomed before them, the remnants of previous battles. Zachary's eyes flicked between his instruments in the visual field, plotting a course through the dangerous maze. Navigational data incoming, Quasar said, her fingers dancing across her console. Uploading to squadron. Zachary felt a surge of pride as he watched the other fighters fall into formation behind them, following the path he and Quasar blazed, human and Krenim pilots working in perfect harmony, guided by their example. They emerged from the debris field to find the Zorgon armada arrayed before them, a wall of sleek, predatory ships jam-packed with weaponry. For a moment, Zachary's breath caught in his throat at the sheer scale of the enemy force. "Squadron, this is Starbreak lead," he said, pushing down his fear. "Prepare to execute attack pattern Delta." Acknowledgements crackled over the comm as Zachary angled their fighter towards the heart of the Zorgon formation. He felt Quasar tense beside him, her skin rippling with anticipation. The first volley of Zorgon fire lit up space around them. Zachary's hands flew over the controls, guiding their X-37 through a series of tight rolls and jukes. Quasar's targeting systems sang as she returned fire, her shots finding weak points in the Zorgon shields with uncanny accuracy. "Now!" Zachary called, and the rest of the squadron sprang into action. Human and Krenim fighters swarmed around the larger Zorgon ships, exploiting the openings Zachary and Quasar had created. Explosions blossomed in the vacuum, silent but brilliant. As the battle intensified, Zachary noticed something strange. A group of Zorgon ships near the edge of the formation had broken ranks, turning their weapons on their own allies. "Quasar, are you seeing this?" he asked, disbelief coloring his voice. Her inner eyelids flickered rapidly. "Affirmative. It appears Krazator's intelligence was correct. There is indeed a rebel faction within the Zorgon fleet." The unexpected development threw the battlefield into chaos. Zorgon ships fired indiscriminately, caught between two enemies. Zachary gritted his teeth, struggling to make sense of the evolving tactical situation. "Starbreak lead to all units," he broadcast. "Adjust targeting priorities. Focus fire on non-rebel Zorgon vessels." As their squadron adapted to the new reality, Zachary spotted their primary objective, the Zorgon flagship, a behemoth of a vessel that dwarfed everything around it. "There's our target," he said to Quasar. "Ready to make history?" Her skin shimmered with dedication. "Let's end this war." Zachary pushed their X-37 to its limits, weaving through the storm of weapons fire that surrounded the flagship. Behind them, the rest of the squadron followed, taking heavy losses as they pressed the attack. As they closed in on the weak point identified in their briefing, Zachary realized something was wrong. The flagship's defenses were far stronger than expected, a web of energy shields and point defense weapons that shredded incoming fighters. "We can't get through," he muttered, watching another X-37 explode in a brief flare of light. Quasar's voice was steady. "What's our alternative?" Zachary's mind raced, considering and discarding options in split seconds. Then he saw it, the flagship's main cannon, a massive construct that building up energy for a devastating attack. "We go for the cannon," he said, already adjusting their course. Quasar's surprise was evident in her voice. "That's not the plan." "Plans change," Zachary replied, his focus absolute as he piloted directly towards the charged weapon. The Zorgons, caught off guard by the suicidal maneuver, failed to react in time. Quasar, trusting Zachary's instincts, targeted the cannon's vulnerable charging chamber. "Firing," she announced, her voice taut with concentration. A salvo of missiles streaked from their X-37, crossing the short distance in the blink of an eye. They struck home with devastating effect, burrowing into the cannon's inner workings before detonating. The explosion was spectacular, a chain reaction that ripped through the flagship's systems. Massive shock waves buffeted their fighter as the Zorgon vessel began to break apart. "We did it," Zachary breathed, allowing himself a moment of relief. His elation was short-lived. Warning klaxons blared as their X-37 shuddered violently, systems failing across the board. "Multiple hull breaches," Quasar reported, her voice calm despite the dire situation. "Life support compromised, engines offline." Zachary fought with the controls, trying to stabilize their craft, but it was no use. They were adrift, carried by momentum away from the battlefield as the remnants of the Zorgon fleet scattered in disarray. As the adrenaline of combat faded, Zachary became acutely aware of their predicament. Floating in the vastness of space, their life support failing, rescue uncertain. He turned to Quasar, seeing his own fears reflected in her alien features. In that moment, with death a very real possibility, the walls between them crumbled. "Quasar," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I need to tell you something." Her inner eyelids fluttered, a gesture he had come to recognize as anticipation. "Yes, Zachary?" He hesitated, then pushed on. "I care for you, more than just as a partner or a friend. I think I love you." Quasar's skin rippled with a pattern he had never seen before, a swirl of colors that took his breath away. "Zachary," she said softly, "I feel the same." As their words hung in the air between them, Zachary noticed a change coming over Quasar. Her skin pulsed with an inner light, and he felt a strange sensation in his own body, as if an electric current was passing between them. "What's happening?" he asked, a mix of wonder and concern in his voice. Quasar's eyes widened in realization. "The bonding process, it's starting." Before Zachary could respond, a new voice crackled over their comm system. "Starbreak lead, this is Rescue 1. Do you copy?" Zachary snapped back to reality, keying the comm with shaking hands. "Rescue 1, this is Starbreak lead. We copy. 2 souls in need of immediate extraction." As the rescue ship approached, Zachary saw something that made him question if he was hallucinating. A group of Zorgon vessels, bearing the markings of the rebel faction, were escorting the human craft. "Looks like we've made some new friends," he murmured to Quasar. She nodded, her skin still shimmering with the strange light of the bonding process. "Perhaps this is the beginning of a new era." As the rescue ship locked onto their damaged fighter, Zachary felt a mix of emotions wash over him. Relief at their survival, pride in their victory, and an exciting uncertainty about what the future held for him and Quasar. The war might be over, but their journey was just beginning. As the rescue ship's docking clamps engaged with their damaged X-37, Zachary felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. The adrenaline that had kept him going through the battle and their near-death experience was fading, replaced by a bone-deep weariness. "Prepare for extraction," a voice crackled over the comm. "Medical teams standing by." Zachary turned to Quasar, her skin still shimmering with that strange pulsating light. "You okay?" She nodded, her multifaceted eyes fixed on him. "I am functioning, but this sensation is unlike anything I've experienced before." As the rescue team cut through the damaged hull of their fighter, Zachary reached out and took Quasar's hand. The moment their skin made contact, a jolt of energy passed between them, causing them both to gasp. "What was that?" Zachary asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Before Quasar could respond, the rescue team breached the cockpit. The next few minutes passed in a blur of activity as they were extracted from the wreckage and rushed into the waiting medical shuttle. Zachary's last coherent thought before losing consciousness was of Quasar's hand in his, and the lingering sensation of that strange, electric connection. He awoke to the sterile white of a medical bay ceiling. The faint hum of equipment and the antiseptic smell told him they were no longer in space. Turning his head, he saw Quasar in the adjacent bed, her eyes closed but her skin still shimmering faintly. Good to see you awake, Captain Shaw, a voice said. Zachary focused on the speaker, a woman in a lab coat with short dark hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. Where are we? He asked, his voice rough. Mars Medical Facility, she replied. I'm Dr. Elena Martinez, lead xenobiologist here. How are you feeling? Zachary took a moment to assess himself. Tired, sore, but alive, which is more than I expected a few hours ago. Dr. Martinez nodded, making a note on her tablet. And the sensation you reported during your rescue? The connection with Quasar? Zachary's eyes widened. How did you... The rescue team's report, she explained. Plus, well, we've been monitoring some unusual readings from both of you since you arrived. As if on cue, Quasar stirred in her bed. Her eyes opened, immediately seeking out Zachary. When their gazes met, that now familiar spark of energy passed between them. Dr. Martinez watched the interaction with keen interest. Fascinating, she murmured. Captain Shaw, Lieutenant Quasar, I believe you've initiated a Krenim bonding process. Quasar sat up, her skin rippling with surprise. That's impossible, she said. The bonding process requires specific rituals, preparations. Under normal circumstances, yes, Dr. Martinez interjected. But your situation was far from normal. The combination of extreme stress, your pre-existing connection, and your near-death experience seems to have triggered the process spontaneously. Zachary looked between Quasar and Dr. Martinez, trying to process this information. What exactly does this mean for us? Dr. Martinez's expression turned serious. That's what we're trying to determine. Preliminary scans show physiological changes in both of you. Enhanced neural activity, synchronized brain waves, even some cellular modifications. It's unprecedented. Quasar's skin rippled with a mix of emotions Zachary couldn't quite decipher. Can it be reversed? The doctor shook her head. As far as we can tell, the process is irreversible and still progressing. We need to run more tests to understand the full implications. As Dr. Martinez outlined the battery of tests they would need to undergo, Zachary found his attention drawn back to Quasar. Their eyes met, and in that moment, he felt a wave of her emotions wash over him. Confusion, fear, but also a deep underlying affection that made his breath catch. Did you feel that? He asked softly. Quasar nodded, her inner eyelids flickering rapidly. Your concern, your care for me? Yes. Dr. Martinez watched their exchange with rapt attention. Empathic communication, she breathed. This is extraordinary. Before she could continue, the door to the medical bay slid open. Admiral Rodriguez strode in, followed closely by General Blackwood and a tall, imposing Krenim that Zachary recognized as Nexus, Quasar's father. Dr. Martinez, Rodriguez said, her voice taut with tension. Report. As the doctor quickly summarized their findings, Zachary noticed the varied reactions of their visitors. Rodriguez remained impassive, but there was a glint of interest in her eyes. Blackwood seemed to be viewing them with a new, calculating gaze. And Nexus, the Krenim's skin was a storm of conflicting patterns, his eyes fixed on his daughter. A human Krenim bond, Blackwood mused, stroking his chin. The military applications could be significant. Nexus bristled, his skin flashing with indignation. My daughter is not a military experiment. Gentlemen, Rodriguez cut in, her voice sharp. This situation extends far beyond military considerations. The diplomatic implications alone are staggering. Zachary cleared his throat, drawing their attention. With all due respect, what about our considerations? Quasar and I are the ones going through this. Rodriguez nodded, her expression softening slightly. You're right, Captain. But you must understand, this development affects more than just the two of you. The Interspecies Relations Committee is already convening an emergency session to discuss the implications. Quasar sat up straighter, her skin rippling with dedication. We understand the gravity of the situation, Admiral, but we request to be active participants in these discussions, not just subjects to be studied. Zachary felt a surge of pride at Quasar's words, coupled with his own grit. We're still soldiers, he added. Whatever this bond means, We're prepared to face it as we've faced every other challenge, together. The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of the situation hanging heavy in the air. Finally, Rodriguez spoke. "Very well," she said. "Rest and recover. Dr. Martinez will run her tests, but I promise you both will have a voice in what happens next." She turned to leave, then paused. "And, for what it's worth, I'm glad you made it back alive." As the group filed out, leaving Zachary and Quasar alone with Dr. Martinez, Zachary felt a mix of emotions swirling within him: uncertainty about the future, concern over the political storm brewing around them, but also a deep, unshakable connection to the cranium beside him. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The bond between them, still new and not fully understood, pulsed with potential, a bridge between two species and a promise of something greater than either of them had imagined possible. Dr. Martinez cleared her throat, bringing their attention back to the present. "Shall we begin the tests?" she asked, her eyes alight with scientific curiosity. Zachary and Quasar exchanged a look, a silent communication passing between them. Then, in unison, they nodded. The first step on their new journey was about to begin. But neither Zachary nor Quasar could have anticipated the magnitude of what lay ahead. As days turned into weeks, the Mars Medical Facility became a hive of activity. Dr. Martinez and her team worked tirelessly, conducting test after test on the newly bonded pair. Each day brought new discoveries about the extent of their connection. "Your neural patterns are synchronizing at an astonishing rate," Dr. Martinez explained, gesturing to a holographic display of their brain scans. "It's as if your minds are becoming one cohesive unit." Zachary felt a flutter of excitement from Quasar through their bond. He turned to her, marveling at how her skin rippled with iridescent patterns that seemed to mirror his own emotions. Their training sessions became the talk of the facility. In the specially designed combat simulation room, Zachary and Quasar moved as one, their actions perfectly coordinated without a word spoken between them. They dodged holographic projectiles with inhuman speed and precision, their movements a blur of synchronized grace. As news of their unprecedented bond spread, so did the controversy. Protests erupted on Earth and the Crenime homeworld, with conservative factions decrying the union as an abomination. The Interspecies Relations Committee found itself at the center of a political firestorm. Admiral Rodriguez strode into their quarters one morning, her face set in a grim expression. "We're accelerating the timeline," she announced without preamble. "The committee has decided to hold a public address and union ceremony. We need to show the galaxy the potential of what you two represent." Zachary felt a surge of anxiety from Quasar. He reached out, taking her hand, and instantly felt their emotions align, fear giving way to persistence. "When?" Zachary asked, his voice steady. 2 weeks, Rodriguez replied. "And I won't lie to you. It's going to be dangerous. We've received credible threats from multiple extremist groups." As Rodriguez outlined the security measures being put in place, Zachary's mind raced. Through their bond, he sensed Quasar's analytical mind working in tandem with his own, assessing risks and formulating strategies. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparations. Security protocols were tightened to unprecedented levels. Zachary and Quasar found themselves at the center of a storm of activity, undergoing final medical examinations, rehearsing their public address, and continuing their combat training. On the eve of the ceremony, as they lay in their separate beds in the medical bay, Zachary felt a wave of emotion from Quasar that made him sit up. "Quasar," he called softly, "what's wrong?" She turned to him, her multifaceted eyes shimmering in the dim light. "I'm afraid, Zachary," she admitted. "Not for myself, but for what our union represents. The hopes of so many rest on our shoulders." Zachary got up and moved to her bedside, taking her hand. The now familiar jolt of energy passed between them, but this time it felt different, stronger, more focused. "We're in this together," he said firmly. "Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it as one." As dawn broke on the day of the ceremony, the Mars facility hummed with tension. Zachary and Quasar were escorted to a secure preparation room, surrounded by a team of elite human and Krenim guards. Through the window, Zachary could see ships arriving, dignitaries from Earth, the Krenim homeworld, and even a contingent of Zorgon rebels. The sight of former enemies coming together filled him with a sense of hope. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the facility. Admiral Rodriguez's voice came over the comm system, tense but controlled. Security breach in Sectors 3 and 7. All personnel to battle stations. Zachary and Quasar exchanged a look, their minds linking instantly. Without a word, they moved in perfect unison, heading for the door. "Wait," one of the guards called. "We have orders to keep you here." Zachary turned, his eyes blazing with purpose. "With all due respect, we're not sitting this out. We're soldiers, and we have a duty to protect." Before the guards could protest further, Zachary and Quasar were moving. They navigated the facility's corridors with uncanny speed, their enhanced abilities allowing them to outpace their escort. As they rounded a corner, they encountered a group of intruders, a mix of humans and what appeared to be Zorgon defectors. Without hesitation, Zachary and Quasar sprang into action. Their movements were a blur, perfectly synchronized. Zachary ducked as Quasar leaped over him, her foot connecting with an attacker's chest. He swept low, taking out another's legs as Quasar used his back as a springboard to launch herself at a third. In a matter of seconds, the intruders were neutralized. Zachary and Quasar stood back to back, breathing heavily but exhilarated. "That was," Zachary began. "Incredible," Quasar finished. A slow clap echoed down the corridor. They turned to see Admiral Rodriguez approaching, flanked by security personnel. "Impressive," she said, her eyes glinting with a mix of admiration and calculation. "But we're not out of the woods yet. We've received intel that a group of extremists has taken hostages in the main ceremony hall." Zachary felt a surge of drive through his bond with Quasar. He knew without asking that she was thinking the same thing he was. "Admiral," he said, straightening to attention, "we volunteer for the rescue operation." Rodriguez studied them for a long moment, then nodded sharply. "Very well, but you'll follow my orders to the letter. Understood?" As they moved out, Zachary caught sight of their reflection in a polished wall panel. He and Quasar moved in perfect harmony. Their steps matched, their postures mirrored. In that moment, he realized that whatever challenges lay ahead, they were more than just partners or lovers. They were two halves of a greater whole, a living symbol of what was possible when different species came together. And they were about to show the galaxy just how powerful that union could be. The hostage situation in the main ceremony hall was tense, but with their newfound abilities and perfect synchronization, Zachary and Quasar led the rescue operation with unprecedented efficiency. Within minutes, they had neutralized the extremists and freed the hostages, showcasing the true potential of their bond. As the dust settled, Admiral Rodriguez approached them, her expression a mix of awe and commitment. "That was exceptional work," she said, "but I'm afraid our challenges are nowhere near the end." She led them to a secure briefing room where holographic displays flickered to life, revealing a series of alarming intelligence reports. "We've uncovered a massive plot," Rodriguez explained, her voice grave. "The Purity Front and their Zorgon allies are planning coordinated attacks on Earth, Mars, and the Krenim homeworld." Zachary felt a surge of alarm through his bond with Quasar. The implications were staggering. If successful, these attacks could shatter the fragile peace they'd worked so hard to achieve. "What's our move, Admiral?" Zachary asked, his mind already racing with potential strategies. Rodriguez's eyes gleamed with a hint of pride. "We're mobilizing a new elite unit, composed of bonded human Krenim pairs like yourselves. You two will lead the team on a critical mission to infiltrate and disable the Purity Front's main base of operations." As Rodriguez outlined the details, Zachary and Quasar exchanged a look, their thoughts aligning without a word. The base was hidden in the treacherous asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, a location that would challenge even the most skilled pilots. The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. Zachary and Quasar worked tirelessly with their new team, a diverse group of human Krenim pairs who had undergone similar bonding processes. In the training simulations, they pushed the boundaries of their abilities, discovering new ways to leverage their telepathic connections. Finally, the day of the mission arrived. As they boarded their advanced X-37 fighter, Zachary felt a mix of anticipation and drive flowing through his bond with Quasar. They launched from the Mars facility, leading a squadron of sleek spacecraft into the void of space. As they approached the asteroid belt, the first signs of resistance appeared on their scanners. Purity Front fighters emerged from hidden bases within the rocky debris, their weapons charging. "Evasive maneuvers," Zachary called out, his hands flying over the controls in perfect sync with Quasar's movements. Their X-37 danced through the asteroid field, weaving between massive rocks and debris with impossible precision. Through their bond, Zachary could sense the trajectory of each obstacle, while Quasar's superior spatial awareness allowed them to plot the safest course. The space around them erupted into chaos as the rest of their team engaged the enemy fighters. Laser fire crisscrossed the void, illuminating the dark expanse in brilliant flashes of light. "There!" Quasar's voice cut through Zachary's concentration. Through her eyes, he saw it, a massive camouflage structure nestled within a cluster of asteroids, the Purity Front's hidden base. As they approached, the base's defenses came to life. A shimmering energy shield sprang into existence, while turrets emerged from concealed ports, spitting deadly plasma bolts into space. "We need to take out those shield generators," Zachary muttered, his mind already formulating a plan. Without a word, Quasar understood, reaching for the EVA suits stored behind their seats. In a maneuver that would have been suicidal for any other team, Zachary and Quasar exited their fighter mid-flight. Using their suit thrusters, they navigated the treacherous space around the base, dodging debris and enemy fire. Their movements were a ballet of precision and speed. Zachary planted explosive charges on key structural points, while Quasar covered him, her reflexes allowing her to deflect incoming projectiles with well-timed energy pulses from her suit. With the charges set, they retreated to their X-37. The explosion rocked the asteroid field, creating a brief window in the base's defenses. "All units, move in," Zachary commanded, leading the charge toward the now vulnerable structure. The team breached the base's outer hull, their ships docking in a cavernous hangar bay. As they disembarked, alarms blared throughout the facility. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the metallic corridors. Zachary and Quasar took point, leading their team deeper into the heart of the enemy stronghold. They moved as one, their enhanced abilities allowing them to anticipate and counter every threat they encountered. As they fought their way through waves of Purity Front soldiers, Zachary couldn't help but marvel at the seamless integration of human and Krenum tactics. Where he saw openings for close-quarters combat, Quasar provided long-range support with her superior aim. When she sensed hidden enemies through her acute hearing, Zachary was already moving to flank them. Their progress was swift, but as they neared the central control room, the resistance intensified. Automated defense systems sprang to life, filling the air with a deadly lattice of laser beams. "Cover me!" Quasar called out, her skin rippling with patterns of concentration. She leapt into action, her lithe form twisting and contorting in ways that seemed to defy physics. Zachary felt her movements through their bond, providing suppressing fire exactly where she needed it. With a final acrobatic leap, Quasar reached the control panel. Her fingers danced over the alien interface, overriding the security protocols. The laser grid flickered and died, allowing the rest of the team to advance. They burst into the control room, quickly subduing the Purity Front leaders who had barricaded themselves inside. But as Zachary secured the last of the prisoners, a chill ran down his spine. Through his bond with Quasar, he sensed her sudden alarm. He turned to see her staring at a massive holographic display, her multifaceted eyes wide with shock. "Zachary," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They've activated it, the antimatter weapon. It's targeting Earth, Mars, and my homeworld simultaneously." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The countdown timer on the display showed less than an hour until launch. They had neutralized the Purity Front leadership, but their true fight was just beginning. Zachary met Quasar's gaze, feeling their dedication solidify through their bond. Without a word, they knew what had to be done. The fate of 3 worlds now rested in their hands, and failure was not an option.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.